18 months ago, my wife walked into my home office, tears running down her face, and just said, I can't do this anymore. If you've ever been on the other end of hearing those words, it's like a punch to your gut. I jumped up out of my chair. I was getting ready to say anything and everything of, we can fix this, what's wrong, what did I do, what's going on? Before I said anything, she continued, I just can't do my job anymore. I can't manage, I don't know how to lead, I feel like I'm such a failure. Woo. Not where I thought that conversation was going, and so glad it was not where I thought it was going. I got out of my chair. She saw me smiling and was like, what are you smiling about? Went over and gave her a hug. I said, babe, no one in leadership knows what they're doing. What do you think I do every week when I go work with companies and speak at events? It's to help leaders. You're not a failure. You just haven't been trained. What I found interesting is that 83% of businesses surveyed say that leadership development is vital. Yet, less than 5% have actually implemented it within their organization. Another surprising statistic says that 50% of people that left their last job reported doing so due to their manager. Not the job, not the responsibilities, not the free pizza Fridays. It's the person they reported to. What I see over and over and over again in my work is that we've created a culture of taking A-plus performers. People are great at their roles, putting them into management and making them C-level managers because we're not training them. Even worse, we're expecting managers to automatically be leaders. And those are two very different roles. In fact, management is focusing on task and making sure your teams do it. It's a role. Leadership is a choice and a mindset. And they're very different. When I was thinking about today and what I wanted to talk about, I know we have a room full of leaders. We have people early in leadership. We have people that are incredibly experienced. We have those that you're a one-man or one-woman shop. We have those that you're leading teams of hundreds to 200s. And so what I thought about would be the most value is to talk about two key areas of leadership that I believe are incredibly important. Give you a little bit of background and maybe some tactical things you can do to grow in each of those areas. Before I do, I want to flash back a little bit. I grew up in 2.5 hours east of here in the small town of Jacksonville, Texas. Yes, that picture's old because who in here would not love those gas prices right now? $1.92 unleaded. But I grew up 2 hours east of Dallas in Jacksonville. I was an only child. My mom was an elementary school teacher. My dad had 2 little gas stations in our town. And for those of you that ever grew up in a family business, you know what that means. If you're not playing sports every Saturday, every spring break and summer vacation, guess where you are? You're in the store. And I would spend my days bagging ice, cleaning the gas pump, stocking the cooler, putting out candy, and yes, sweeping the parking lot. And I'd done these activities days after days all throughout my youth, but there's one specific afternoon that I remember. I had done most of my chores. I was about 8 years old. And at 8 years old, you have tons of priorities. I've got video games to play. I got to play football with friends. I've got other things that are more important than working in the store. And so I'm getting all of my chores done, and I have one left: sweep the parking lot. If you've ever been to a gas station parking lot, there's probably a lottery ticket on the ground, cigarette butt, dirt, trash. It's everywhere. It's inevitable. No matter how well you sweep it, it's always going to be dirty a little bit later. And I'd swept this parking lot before, and I knew it was going to be dirty again a little bit later. So in my head, I get the great idea that I could take an hour and sweep it all perfectly clean, knowing it's going to get dirty again. Or I could rush it as fast as I possibly can, be done in 10 to 15 minutes, and then I can get home to the real priorities on my Nintendo or with my neighbors. Guess what 8-year-old Jake chose? I would take that big broom and race through the parking lot as fast as I possibly could. I would miss spots here and there, but I got most of it. And I remember putting that broom up, seeing my dad's truck pull up that day and think, yes, I'm done. I get to go home. Dad, let's go. Dad hops out of his truck, looks around the parking lot, sees that lottery ticket, that cigarette butt I missed, goes in the store, grabs the broom, and hands me back the broom. Do it again. Dad, come on. It's almost clean. It's just going to get dirty again later. And it was in that moment my dad taught me two incredibly powerful lessons on leadership that I've never forgotten. The first is if you're going to do a job, do it to the best of your ability every single time. Because there's going to be a point in your career that you don't want to do certain things. All of us in this room, regardless of how much we love the work we do, there's probably aspects of our role that we don't necessarily love. But can we be trusted in those moments to still give our best efforts, or do we allow them to slip when we don't necessarily want to be doing it? The second lesson that is even more important and ties into that, my dad taught me, is that eyes are always on us. That day as a kid, people in our small town knew who my dad was. And my dad told me, they know you're my son. And if they see you cut corners sweeping the parking lot, they may assume we cut corners in the store. They may assume we don't do things by the book because of how they see you do that. And guess what? As you get older, people are always going to be watching you. Do you want to be a lesson of who to follow or an example of what to avoid? As leaders, regardless of whether we're by ourselves, we have a small team, we have teams of hundreds, people are always watching you. If anybody in here has kids, your kid probably picked up a bad habit, maybe a 4-letter word, not from school, but probably at home when we didn't think they were listening or watching us. Because kids are always watching. And so are our teams. So are the people that know we own businesses. Maybe we're in real estate. They see us work in real estate all the time, but if we do something over here at Target, like, I don't know, not rack our shopping cart, they may assume that we deflect certain responsibilities with our work. Eyes are always on us. Are we lessons of the standard to follow? Are we examples of what to avoid? Now compare my decision with someone else. It's January 31st, 1995. 2 days ago, the San Francisco 49ers won the Super Bowl. Yesterday, they're celebrating in the streets of the city. Jerry Rice, Steve Young, going down the streets, partying like you do when you win the Lombardi Trophy. And today, January 31st, quarterback Steve Young decides, I'm going to go to the team facility and clean out my locker. Nobody's going to be there. It's going to be a ghost town. It's the perfect time to go. So Young shows up. He checks in with the security guard. It's a ghost town. Nobody's there. Walks through the halls. If you know anything about Young's career, this Super Bowl was so pivotal because he finally got out of Joe Montana's shadow. He gets to his locker. He's cleaning out things in his locker. And he hears a noise coming from the door out to the practice field. That's odd. Not the only one here. Young goes over to the door, props it open, and looks out back and sees none other than Jerry Rice running wind sprints and routes on air, working as hard as he possibly could to prepare for the next season. Steve Young told this story at Rice's Hall of Fame induction. And what he mentioned most, he said nobody would know Jerry was there working. Nobody would have blamed him for taking the day off after we just won the parade. Nobody would have blamed him for going through the motions. We had a long season. But here was someone, regardless of whether he realized he was being watched or not, was giving his absolute best effort to get better. Because that's where leadership starts. Starts with the person we see in the mirror every day. And I think that's vital for us to understand because a lot of us have been in those rooms and been in those organizations where we hear the way we're supposed to act and lead and live, but what we see is a very different story. And we have a hard time doing that. And so knowing that we're in a leadership position, we have to first model the behavior. And I think it goes beyond just saying we want to get better. All of us in this room want to get better because we're here at the Good Leader Conference, right? We've made the opportunity and invested the time to be here, to learn, to grow, to get better. But being here alone doesn't make us better. For example, 3 frogs were sitting on a log and one decided to jump. How many frogs are sitting on the log? 3. because the decision to jump is not the same as actually jumping. And the reason I bring that up is because we've decided we want to be better by being here, but how are we going to get better? We don't naturally wake up one day and become a better leader, become better at managing our teams, become more resilient. We do it by setting very clear targets and chasing those targets. Then we evaluate it. It's kind of like what Jordan was talking about this morning. He was talking about putting your phone on Do Not Disturb, turning it into a landline, testing that. That's a great way to do it because what do? You set a clear target. What's the one thing I want to get better at? I'm going to work on after work, putting my phone on Do Not Disturb, put it in the other room, and spend time with my spouse and kids. I'm going to try it, and then I'm going to evaluate how well did I do, and where can I get better? Or for some of us, it's setting intention with our calendars by time blocking. Instead of leaving white space in our calendars where we hope we get certain tasks and priority done, it's about assigning a block of time to work on that task. But I know what happens. I know what happens at these events. I've been to a ton of these events. We write down pages of notes. You heard incredible things this morning from Jordan and Marissa and Brian. You probably got ideas of what you want to implement. And one of two things typically happens at events like this. The first is we leave here and we have pages of notes. All the things we're going to do to change our business, how we work, protect our time, and we're going to start tonight. We're going to start tonight. We're going to go all day tomorrow. We're going to go Saturday, Sunday, Monday. We're going to go every single day of the week implementing everything. And within 2 weeks, we burned ourselves out and quit. It's what we do every January, right? We set one big goal, and instead of going after it in little chunks, we go all in. We never work out. We're working out 2 times a day, every day. We don't eat very well. We're doing paleo, keto, everything, vegan. We're all in instead of starting small. The other thing we do is we make all these pages of notes. Then we get back into our office, get a little busy with those emails, that problem with our team. And what happens? We forget about all the things we said we were going to do until a month, 2 months. Next year's Good Leader Conference. And then we open our notebook again, thought, oh, I was going to do that. And then we start to beat ourselves up internally because we didn't take action on the things that we said we wanted to. But what if today, each one of us in this room, of everything you wrote down, what if you just picked one of them? One small thing that for the next 2 weeks you worked on implementing. You can still have everything else on your list that's amazing and will help you, but what if you just picked one? Anybody in here as a kid, as an adult, with your kids, play with Legos? A Lego block by itself is completely worthless unless you're barefoot walking through the house, right? Then it'll find you. But what happens when you stack Lego on top of Lego on top of Lego on top of Lego? You can build something pretty incredible. If you look up world's largest Lego creations, you'll see a Singapore Airlines airplane. It's 11 feet by 12 feet, weighs 225 pounds. There's a guy in the UK that's even built a house with a working toilet out of Legos. My construction folks here, you're going to have to tell me how they do this. That's a lot of Lego pieces. That's a lot of time. But what it stands to say is little bitty Lego blocks stacked over time create epic creations. Little bitty choices stacked every single day create pretty epic careers. And more importantly, pretty epic lives. So of everything on your list, what if you just took one and said, what's my Lego block that I'm going to stack for the next 2 weeks? And after those 2 weeks, if I have a good feel for it, I'm going to add another Lego block. I'm going to take something else on my list. Remove the pressure to be perfect, to do everything, or heck, the worry that you're going to forget about it until next year, and pick the one and do it. Little Lego blocks start. The other thing that I want to challenge you to do is an exercise of reflection. We do something with all of our clients, and I encourage folks to do it. I do it every Friday afternoon called Start, Stop, Continue. It's pretty simple. It's 3 questions. Every Friday afternoon, the last thing I do before the weekend is look back at the previous week. What's one thing I did not do this week I got to start doing next week to be more successful? What's one thing I did this week that if I'm honest, I probably should stop to be more successful? And then building my confidence with what am I doing well I should continue doing. Every week asking those questions, start, stop, continue. Because what that allows you to do is set targets every week of where you can aim for in the pursuit of your best. Even better, if you get into the habit of doing it with your team, you give your team targets so they're constantly growing and improving. Because management is managing the task. Leadership is about developing the person. So a simple exercise, a start, stop, continue, gives you the opportunity to develop them every single week. And even better, you have the opportunity to develop them because of what I want to talk about next. But before I do, I want to remind you with this. We've talked a lot about not comparing yourself to others, not pursuing to be the best, but your best. I want to remind you as leaders in this room, because you've volunteered and said, I'm going to lead, I want to be a leader, I want to be a good leader, that the most selfless thing you will ever do is the uncomfortable work to improve yourself and pursue your best so that you bring your best to everyone you're trying to lead and serve. It's not about us. Leadership is never about the leader. It's about how we become our best so we give those we're trying to lead and serve the best we can. Because otherwise, by default, we're choosing to give our teams, our friends, our family, just good enough. And just good enough is the bare minimum. It's not the pursuit of excellence. It's not pursuing your best and your potential. It's going through the motions. And I think every one of us in here understand the opportunity we have to serve, to lead. And so we don't want to cut corners for others by giving them just good enough. Now, we know leading others starts with us, because unless we're modeling the behavior as the example or the lesson of who to follow instead of the example of what to avoid, then we earn the right to lead others. And the way I want to talk about this is really like a piggy bank. I look at relationships a lot of times with our teams like piggy banks. How are we making daily deposits in others? A lot of us in the past, maybe when we rose into management, we rose into a leadership position, we're starting to hold people accountable, get on to them for not doing the task, get on to them for not doing things, but we've done nothing to build up the bank account first. One of my clients that's a CEO in Florida, when he took on a new job in 2020, moved over to a new company, the first thing he did for 2 months is every single morning he took 10 minutes to have a cup of coffee with a different member of the team. They would sit down and talk nothing about work. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about your family. Tell me about what your goals are. Tell me what your passions are. Every day he did that. He would track everything in his spreadsheet that he could refer back to. But every day he did that, he was making deposits in these people. Because what happened is his people started to get motivated to work with him and for him because they realized they were not a number on the expense report. They weren't just a digit on payroll. They were a person that was contributing to a team. Some of us in here, if we're running our own show, if we're part of a larger organization, we've worked with people for a year, 2 years, 10 years. And some of us can't even tell them their spouse's name, their kids' names, or what they like to do outside of work. Because all we talk about is work. But relationships and trust are key to any team, and the way we do that is by investing in the person. How else will we have the opportunity to ever share a testimony or how Christ has changed our life if we've never developed a relationship with the person first to earn the right to have certain conversations with them, for them to trust us, to come talk to us when they're struggling? So what if one of the things you did for the rest of this year is once a week you had a cup of coffee with a different person on your team? Better yet, what if you had a second cup of coffee on Zoom or in person with a leader in here? And you started building relationships, not just with the people you lead, but with other leaders in this area you can learn from and grow from. And one of the easiest ways to do this, I'm going to wrap up with this, is a 3-question exercise you can do with your teams after you've started forging relationships. We call it the what, why, how. What is something that every organization does, right? What is my role? How do I succeed in it? Essentially, how do I not get fired? We put it on job applications everywhere, right? When we hire somebody, what do you need to do? Fewer companies will say, why is what I do important to the team's success? This is helping the individual connect the dots to the work they do and why it matters. Think of a job like an administrative assistant or a front desk receptionist. That's a role that sometimes gets overlooked, but guess what? I have clients, they call that role the director of first impressions because you're the first person somebody new interacts with our brand. They talk to you, they suddenly start associating our brand, how we treat people, how good we are with how you treat them. So they understand the importance of that role and they're empowered in it. And then finally, how does what I do help me get to where I want to go? This is the big one. Because we have people on our teams that we're leading right now that don't want to be with us 5 to 10 years from now. And that's 100% okay. The first team member I ever hired, I knew wouldn't be in my team in 5 years. She wanted to start her own company. I said, great. Come in, I'll teach you everything I know if you'll give us everything you've got. And when you're ready to go, just give us a couple weeks heads up. We poured into her. Guess what? She's recruited for us ever since she's left because she knew we poured into her and wanted to see her succeed with her long-term goals instead of just protecting us. I believe it was Steve Jobs that had the quote that said, that he was asked, what happens if you pour into your employees and they leave? And he asked, what if you don't and they stay? So how are we investing in the people in our charge? By communicating what they do, why it's important, and how it's helping them get to where they want to go. Because that is what keeps them motivated and engaged. And even if they leave, they become people that will constantly refer back to you. 69% of employees report that they would work harder if they felt their efforts were recognized. How are we connecting and praising with our people? I want to leave you with this quote by Michael Jordan I love. It says, earn your leadership every day. And what I truly think this means is you don't have to be perfect to make an impact. None of us in here are going to be perfect, nor do we have to be. But what we have to do is every single day wake up and say, how am I getting better and pursuing my best so I can lead better? How am I investing in the people in my charge to connect with them? And then what am I doing to coach and develop them so that they can chase their goals and dreams too? The world has a leadership shortage right now. And I don't believe it's because we lack the talent, but because we're lacking the training. And what I would love nothing more is than this room of good leaders to go out and create more good leaders. Because that's truly what leadership's about. It's not the attention, it's not the following. It's the influence and how we invest in others. Thank you.
Awesome, Jake. Thank you so much. We got about, 6.5, 7 minutes here, so got a few questions for you. And we got this one over and over again, so we're going to lead off with this one. Is purple your favorite color?
TCU plays Saturday,
Oh,
so
there it is.
College football kicks off. I felt like I had to go purple today.
And I noticed you got the purple kicks on,
you got
too.
a match.
So
you got a match.
That's right. That's awesome. What would 2023 Jake say to 2011 Jake selling shirts out of his car?
You have no idea the ride you're in for.
Biggest piece of advice that you give him?
Biggest piece of advice I would give him is pursue excellence and not popularity. The mistake I made early on was trying to be like other groups, be like other brands, get the approval of strangers. And in reality, the best way to do it is to just wake up every day and say, how do I get better?
Yeah.
Because when you pursue popularity and perfection, you end up not doing anything because you're scared to fail or what other people will say. When you chase progress, it's ugly, it's sloppy. You have to work through the mess. But what eventually happens is you get to a point where it's average and okay and good and great, and you do great long enough, you succeed. And what's the deal about success is other people want to know how you can succeed too. And so you have the opportunity at that point to actually help pay it forward with others. Whereas if you're chasing the approval of people, you don't get the chance to help anyone.
Yeah, that's incredible. When you yourself are learning to be authentically who you are,
Yep.
then you can multiply that and help other people, like you said at the end, be good leaders as
100%.
well. A lot of people asking, can you share your morning routine? If you don't have one, what are 3 things you do daily that are non-negotiable?
Yeah, so morning routine varies depending on time zone I'm in, but it's always wake up. I will usually, I'm really weird, but I'll do like a salt water and then a smoothie. I train, I have a quiet time, and then I just journal. And journal's not heavy duty. It's usually 3 bullet points. What am I grateful for? Who do I want to show up as today? And what's one thing I got to achieve to get a win? And so I'm pretty much in there, get a sweat and go every day.
You talked a lot about the unseen things that we do a lot of times, and so what do you think are 2 to 3 unseen things that all leaders should do?
Build yourself every day. Nobody sees if you hit the snooze button or if you wake up and work on yourself physically or you journal or you spend quiet time in the Word. Nobody sees you make that choice. Everybody can't miss the results of those choices made over time. And so I think that's the first one, is invest in yourself, because it's not selfish. It's actually selfless, because as I said, you do the uncomfortable work to improve, so you give others your best. And I think the second one is the preparation side. As leaders, we have to be over-prepared on everything. We don't have the opportunity or the luxury to be able to wing it. We can adapt and we can be resilient, and Marissa talked about when things happen outside of our control. But when you're meeting with your team, having a plan and being intentional with those conversations, when you sit down on a one-on-one to manage versus coach, having a plan to be intentional, people don't see you prepare for those things, but that makes all the difference between adding value to others and just kind of going through the motions.
So how many times have you questioned yourself as an entrepreneur, and how do you work your way out of negative thinking? Daily? Daily. I almost sunk my business in 2017 when I switched from only apparel to pursue this path of speaking and coaching. Literally almost sunk it. Mentally, it was the hardest time, second hardest time I'll say of my life. But there's a young man in here named Jake Clear, somewhere, that took me out to lunch in 2012 when I was under a year into my business. And he asked me how it's going, and I said, not good. And he said, well, good. You're your own worst accountability partner. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you have this brand on competing every day, no matter how hard it gets, no matter how much it sucks, no matter what obstacles you face. So regardless of whether one person, 10 people, 10,000, or one day 10 million buy into this message, you're stuck with it. Because the moment you quit is the moment you tell everyone that what you told them was a lie. So change the business, do what you got to do to pivot, but you're in this to the end because people believe in you, and I'm one of them. Wow.
And that conversation, there he is, that conversation came out 2 years later when I left an event that I'd lost a lot of money at an expo that I couldn't afford to lose. And I was thinking about, how do I quit? How do I get out of this? And that conversation kept replaying in my head that I owed it to the people that had already bought in or that were yet to still buy in, that I needed to keep showing up and being my best and figuring out a way to serve them.
So one last question for you. Like, you just called out somebody that's been in your corner, somebody that's part of your tribe, someone that's been your encouragement. That's kind of been this underlying thread that has come up over and over and over again in what we are talking about. But someone on here actually asked, like, what do you do when you have somebody in your life, whether it's a friend or a family member, who's kind of that negative voice? Maybe they don't believe in you. Maybe they don't believe in your mission. Like, what do you do with that? How do you lead through that? What happens?
Yeah, I got asked for years by family friends who I was super close with of, are you still doing that stupid t-shirt thing, or are you going to go get a real job? And I just smiled, and part of me was like, I'm going to prove you wrong, and I'm okay having a chip on my shoulder. What I learned to do is be very intentional with the relationships I have and the ones that are right around me that I can't control. Be very intentional about what I allow to stick. And I say that because, like, as a speaker, you a lot of times finish a talk and people want to come up and give you advice. And the guys I trained with were like, be very intentional with who you allow to speak to you, because they could completely destroy you without understanding the context of the situation. And so there's always going to be doubters in our lives, always going to be people that are naysayers. However, are you actively overcompensating by getting the right people in your life that are going to encourage you and speak life to you? Not just tell you what you want to hear, but actually tell you truth and encourage you, as well as challenge you when you get off course. And the ones around you that are negative that you can't physically get away from because they're family or they're right there, understand that you're going to have to put up a little bit of wall with them. And if you have to have a little bit of a chip on your shoulder as a motivating factor for a while, you can. There's a great podcast, Modern Wisdom, with Chris Williamson and Alex Hormozy this last week that talked a lot about this with Alex's journey. But more so, drown the noise out by surrounding yourself with the right people, the right circle. Dr. David McClellan from Harvard estimates that 95% of our successes and failures in life can be attributed to the people we habitually associate with. And so if you can't control one, make sure you've got 5 to 6 more that you can control who you're with to drown out the noise, and will build you up if this person ever gets in your ear enough.
Jake, thank you so much for your time. Can we give it up one more time?